Hey guys, welcome back to Joe Yo. It is the podcast about things that are pertinent to, around, and about Johnston County, North Carolina, which is just south of Wake County, North Carolina, where our capital Raleigh is, and it puts it pretty squarely in the middle of the state, which gives us a really good perspective on the way things in North Carolina and the United States have been, are now, and since we use history as a guide for the future, what very well could be in, well, our future. And the last few episodes, we have been focusing on Johnston County's role in the American Revolution, which, there's a whole lot of talk about Boston, rightfully so, and Philadelphia and New York, and again, rightfully so. But the whole revolution, involved all of the colonies, not just those in the North. And things happen here too. And just like you have the heroes of George Washington that you hear about, and Ben Franklin that you hear about, and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, and not to mention people like the people of the Boston Massacre and people, Thomas Paine, and so many figures that we hear about from, that region. What about us? Didn't we get our independence too? Well, I think that's where it gets overlooked sometimes. And that's one of the reasons why we have podcasts like this, to show that it's not just there, it's here too. And so I'm going to use that as a launching point. I'm going to stop there for a second. We're going to get right back into that. But the best way I've found to learn history is to make it relevant to your own life and to see, to sort of personalize these people, see them as people that instead of just names in a book. And the best way I can think of it is the only way I can think of it is to use my own experience. And so I thought about this a little bit and trying to figure out a way to put it in an understandable way. And some of you are not going to get it, but some of you are. Well, see, growing up here, I grew up in Johnston County, and I guess maybe as is in nearly every place, it sort of comes, at least in the my era, 70s and 80s, comes with this expected list of good guys and bad guys, and maybe it's just a thing of being a kid. Everything in the lives of lots of young children sort of revolve around that essential binary system of moralism. And for those of you that are like, what words are you saying here? Kids need a more simplistic explanation, and the best way to do it, one of the good ways to do it, is to say good and bad. And so that our lives as children, in a lot of cases, just sort of revolve around that polar opposite situation. Now, it's pretty simplistic, but it's rock solid. And to a young kid growing up in the 70s and 80s here, for me, it worked. For me, when I was a kid, bad guys were bad guys and good guys were good guys. Devil bad, Jesus good. Ding. Russia bad. United States good. Ding. Growing up here in the late 70s, Luke Skywalker good. Darth Vader bad. Ding. It was easier to make that before the second movie, and then it really only got more complicated after that. But Boss Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard, which was a big deal here, bad. The Duke boys, good. Again, you're growing up and things complicate, but still, then it's easy. See, it's easy. And when you get to sports, things get a little bit iffy, except for Duke. Their mascots were literally devils, so they're always evil. Now, if you're into the whole NASCAR scene, I really never was. There were, and I've heard there maybe still are, good guys and bad guys. I don't really know how, but okay, they're just driving cars. But still, it is that polar system that a young kid finds secure, if not exactly understandable. When I was growing up, wrestling was that way. And if you were a kid in the late 70s and 80s, you pretty much knew, wrestling. If you didn't go, you still knew about it. There were good guys, there were bad guys. Obviously, Ivan Koloff and Nikita Koloff, they were wrestlers. They were bad guys. They were Russian. Of course they were bad guys. Except now growing up, I mean, as I'm grown, I now know that Ivan Koloff actually was Canadian and Nikita was actually from Minnesota, but that doesn't matter. And, so they were bad guys because they were Russian, at least that's what we thought. And Dusty Rhodes was good because he's the American dream. Ricky Steamboat was good. Ric Flair was always bad, Nature Boy or not. But then what happens sometimes is that your mind gets scrambled when Dusty went bad, which happened a couple of times, and the Nature Boy Ric Flair went good, and that will really scramble your gourds. Now, pretending to be your hero when you're playing outside got complicated from time to time, whether it's wrestling or the Dukes of Hazzard, or you're trying to pretend to be a member of a basketball team and you just made the final shot. Pretending to be your hero when you're playing outside gets a little bit complicated from time to time. But in your mind, your heroes stayed good if they went bad, but they were still good, and everybody else was bad. Johnston County had real people like that. But the players can only really settle into their good guys and bad guys roles when the whole event that defines them as such becomes the past and therefore the story. It's kind of hard to do that when it's the present. For example, it's much easier to look at Benedict Arnold as a traitor of the Northeast and or New York. But if it happens right now, the whole story's not been told, so you don't really know. But when it's the past, the narrative gets a bit easier, except when you learn the history, the narrative's not quite as easy. Now, so technically, as part of North Carolina, Johnston County was a part of Great Britain. Technically. The British government was our government and technically our protector if we needed it. But then whenever we see 3 men in July of 1768 be charged with conspiracy to defy the colonial government, we see those 3 guys put in the Johnston County pillory, which is like the stocks where you put your head and your wrists, have their ears cut off and whipped 40 times. It's kind of hard to know who's good and bad. Just saying. Or if you happen to be in Smithfield in the 1770s and see a woman burned alive at the stake for disobeying her slave master in Smithfield. Now, when you see that happen, it's kind of hard to know really who's good and bad if you have to witness that. Now, I will say this though. It sort of gets easier with one of our Johnston County citizens, one of our residents. You won't see it talked about much, but there's a guy that lived in Johnston County, grew up here as a matter of fact, named David Fanning. He grew up in Johnston County. He was born in Virginia, but his father moved to Johnston, probably to farm, and his father died in 1764 whenever his children were young, and there was no mother in the picture. I don't really know. I don't think the record is really clear what happened there, but this David Fanning grows up in Johnston County, which is in modern-day Wake, but I mean really like right on the border. And so you have these 2 children. His 2 young children are going to be effectively orphaned. Now, apparently, whenever his father died, he's going to be apprenticed, because that tended to happen in the past. He's going to be, nowhere to go. We don't really, in Johnston County at the time, it's really, really rural. We don't really have a whole lot of homes or orphanages. What would happen if there was no family in the area, which there was none in this case, a child would typically be apprenticed to someone to learn a trade. So David Fanning, young David Fanning, he was apprenticed to a man named Needham Bryan. We actually have heard that name before in the Regulators Assemble episode. He was one of the town fathers of Smithfield. And he was also apprenticed out to a guy named Thomas Leach, whose own family will play a pretty large role in Johnston County's development, but we'll talk about that later on. So he was apprenticed to Needham Bryan, lived with Needham Bryan, and learned the trades of, I guess, tobacco and so forth. And according to the documentation, although there's not much, these 2 men were not really parental figures to him. They had their own families. And his own family solitude, the feeling that he was very much alone, in his own mind at least, is going to shape his later life very, very, very big way. These guys did not try to take him under their wings. They were not those guys. He was their apprentice. And so whenever he left his apprenticeship and felt very much alone, he didn't have anywhere to go. And like a lot of young men in similar situations, no matter what time period we're talking about, he's going to say he's got nothing else. He's got nothing. So he decides to join the British Army. He's going to leave and move to South Carolina and join the British Army in the upcountry of South Carolina. He's going to find family there that he never had before, really, or haven't had in a long time. He's going to find loyalty with them. And since he felt they were his family and they were loyal to him, he is going to find what he hasn't had in a very long time. So he becomes very solidly loyal to Britain as well. Then the revolution came, and he, like the Koloffs, was on the wrong side. Now, what kind of soldier is David Fanning going to be? Well, when the revolution happens, of course, it's going to pit one group versus another, one brother versus another. It's going to be very much, some historians actually refer to revolution as the first American Civil War. It's completely believable because it wasn't that simple as British versus Americans. Because really there aren't, how do I put this the best way? There are not that many British here. They really rely mostly on loyalists in the colonies. And David Fanning is one of them. So what kind of soldier is he going to make? Well, he's going to see anybody that is against his family, the British Army, as being bad. He's not that great of a soldier at first, but he's very defensive of his army and of Great Britain. And while he may not be the best shot and he may not be the best soldier, he is at least a slippery one. On his own, when the revolution gets kicking in, when it really first starts, David Fanning is going to nearly immediately begin to capture people that he considers rebels. And they were rebels. Now, in the South, the independence-minded people, the people that wanted to have independence for these colonies, were, at least in North Carolina and South Carolina, they were called Whigs. Not, what you put in your head, but W-H-I-G. They were independent-minded people. And so whenever he would see Whigs gathering up gunpowder to mount a resistance against the British, he's going to find a way to stop it, any way he knows how. He's going to, all by himself, find a way to capture gunpowder from them and prisoners to give them back to the British Crown. And of course, that's going to make him really, really infamous, and it's going to put a kind of a price on his head. People will try to capture him, and so they captured him. There's a battle called the Battle of Big Cane Brake in South Carolina in 1775. He got captured, but he escaped. And he was captured again in January. And he was let go on good behavior so that they just said that he was apologetic, said, I'm sorry. Let him go visit his family. But as a loyalist, he was not really that trustworthy, because then whenever we find out that a group of Cherokee, that there's an imminent attack by Cherokee in South Carolina, well, they become suspicious of him because A, he's a loyalist, and B, he is known to frequent Cherokee groups. And so when the Cherokee sided with the loyalists and the British, he was arrested, and with really good reason, because when they did attack, he escaped and led a group of loyalists to the Cherokee. So a Cherokee loyalist raid on a Whig fort failed, and then he escaped to North Carolina in 1776. Another capture, another escape, when he tried to get together a Scottish/Cherokee/loyalist attack on North Carolina Whigs. He was captured 3 times and busted out 3 times, when he slipped quietly back into South Carolina only to get back busy trying to defend Great Britain. For 1.5 years, this man was either putting together a loyalist army or he was captured trying to do so. That happened several times, and every time that man escaped. In 1778, this David Fanning, who grew up in Johnston County, commanded a loyalist company that attacked Whigs in Georgia and captured prisoners and supplies. Now, you may not like the side that the guy is on, but you gotta commend his ability. The dude is slippery, and he's very resourceful. And so Governor John Rutledge of South Carolina during the Revolution in 1779 decided that David Fanning's supporters are just bad. And he banished all of Mr. Fanning's supporters from the state. But he saw that if David Fanning could be turned, he could be a pretty powerful ally. So therefore, he offered a conditional pardon to David Fanning in exchange for his help, and if he would switch sides to help the revolution. So David Fanning, he agreed, and David Fanning became a scout for the South Carolina Whigs. He switched sides, fighting for, this time, not against American independence. But then, in 1780, the British took Charleston, South Carolina, and David Fanning felt like the tide was turning back the way he wanted to turn, so he turned back to the Loyalists. There's one guy that's a bad guy, and that's going to be a traitor, and he began to attack the very guys that he had been stationed with. But then the British lost at Kings Mountain, and David Fanning ran away again. But when British lost at Kings Mountain, the Loyalists began to lose, and so Fanning then ran away again, this time to Chatham County, North Carolina, and he tried to be really quiet this time because now he's angered people in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So he tried to be quiet so he could raise a Loyalist force in North Carolina. Now this guy, when he starts to raise up a Loyalist force in North Carolina, he's going to now begin training people to fight against North Carolinians, like the very same Needham Bryan to which he had been apprenticed. And he scouted for Cornwallis, for Lord Charles Cornwallis, the big guy of the Southern British Army. He scouted for this guy after the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, which is outside of Greensboro, which was technically a British win, but, for Cornwallis was really a long-run loss. So when Cornwallis left, Fanning effectively took over all the Loyalist forces in North Carolina and conducted no fewer than 36 skirmishes. And every Whig group that tried to stop him, he and a small group, they could never be caught when he was raiding. Too slippery. He raided the Chatham Courthouse, right smack dab of Chatham County, North Carolina. He raided the Chatham Courthouse and areas surrounding the Cape Fear all the way to Wilmington. Probably through Johnston on his way back to Chatham County. He even captured with a small group one of the capitals. He captured Hillsborough, one of the temporary capitals of North Carolina. He even captured the doggone governor of North Carolina, Thomas Burke, and aides and soldiers, some of them Continental soldiers who had been Washington's guys. That dude is the business. So, in fact, he not only captured the governor, the Whigs are going to try to rescue the governor from David Fanning, and the two groups, his Loyalist group and North Carolina militia, are going to fight one of the biggest battles of the Revolutionary War in North Carolina near Graham, North Carolina. And even though he was outnumbered, David Fanning won. And he was assisted by a guy named Archibald McDougald of Cumberland County and by Hector McNeil of Bladen County. Both of them were Highland Scots, as was mentioned earlier in the very last episode. So now McNeil died in this battle, but McDougald, he left North Carolina, and after he was captured himself and he escaped himself, much like David Fanning, he made his way up to Nova Scotia, and there he remained until he kind of slipped back into North Carolina later on, but that's another conversation. But when Cornwallis surrendered to Washington in 1781, the war is effectively over, and David Fanning, loyal to the bone to the Loyalist cause, he found himself alone with no more soldiers or supplies, and he was now in enemy territory. He tried to get a pardon. One never really came, so he evacuated the Cape Fear region like a lot of Loyalist Highland Scots, and after a little time in South Carolina, then Spanish Florida, made his own way up to Nova Scotia after being expelled from New Brunswick, which is north of Maine. Johnston County history is full of good guys, and we've mentioned a whole bunch of these dudes. We've mentioned Calvin Jones, good guy. Good guy, did some really good stuff. Well, he's a good guy or not, but good stuff equals good guy. We also have our share of bad guys. David Fanning, undoubtedly one of Johnston County's bad guys. And this is going to do it for the second part, and that should pretty much clear us out. And hope you have enjoyed listening to this one about one of Johnston County's bad boys, and hope to talk to you later. Be good.